Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin and today I'm going to be doing a weekly wrap up, and this is the last week of March. Even though it had some April days in it, I didn't count any of the books that I read starting April 1st basically, but I read enough to talk about in the weekly wrap up. So let's get started. It feels like forever ago that I read this book, but Filthy Sex by Serena Ackroyd. It was so good. It was so good. So this is the last book of the series that she currently has published. I don't know when the next one comes out, but Filthy Sex is about Brennan and Camille. And Camille is the older sister of Inessa, which we see in book 2. She was the Russian arranged marriage romance that I really loved. And so we hear about Camille, and Camille kind of ran away from home. She went to Texas and she was in a relationship with a guy from an MC, and we hear about that in some other books. But now she's back. Even though she's less desirable because she's not a virgin anymore, she's still connected to the Russian mob boss. So people do want to marry her. And her dad is going to betroth her to this really disgusting old dude. And Brennan has had a past affair with Camille and Inessa's mother. Camille knows about this because she read her mother's diaries, and her mother even kind of wrote to Camille saying hey, I know your dad's gonna kill me one day, and if you ever need help, go to Brennan. And it's just it's a little bit of a taboo relationship, and I really loved it. So Camille had plans to approach him to basically make a deal, be hey, I think we should get married. And Brennan was searching for an excuse to marry her as well, because that's the only way that he could protect her from her father, because her father basically has control over her no matter what. This is how mafias work. Almost immediately come to the conclusion that they want the same thing, so it's let's not waste time basically. One of the things that I really love about the 5 Points Mob series, or the Filthy Feckers as a lot of people call it, I really love how gone for the heroines the heroes are in these books. Brennan, it's he sees Camille and he wants to possess her, to own her. These books are so hot. I have 4 flames next to this book because every Serena Ackroyd book that I read in this series, I'm just blown away by the sexual chemistry of the characters. And so most of the books, the relationships start out as very sexual in nature, and then gradually the emotion builds and builds and builds. And I really enjoyed this couple. I love Camille. She was probably one of my favorite characters. I just loved struggle. I hate to say that, but I did. I loved her struggle, what she went through with her previous relationship with the MC person named Nix. I felt for her so much, and I loved her. So she deals with body dysmorphia as well, and I just thought that it was really wonderful because Brennan uses his dominance to get her to stop self-harming, and I thought it worked in a really amazing way. I just love the way that Serena Ackroyd utilized that. So 5 out of 5 stars. Love this series. Can't wait for the next one. Then I decided to pick up another Serena Ackroyd, The Intern, which is an MM office romance. It's no mafia mob affiliation at all. Jen recently read this and she told me that I had to read it, that it was amazing. And I was okay, I'm in the mood for an MM romance. Give it to me. This was so freaking cute. This also age gap. So the very first scene is the hero, Devlin. He goes to this club, which he does own, and it's basically a hookup club, a gay hookup club. And he's not publicly out. His dad is a duke, and his dad's kind of pressuring him to marry and have heirs. And Devlin's just I don't know what it's going to take to convince you. I'm not interested in getting married and having kids. This is not in the cards for me. They don't have such a great relationship, but his dad is kind of ill and is being a lot more involved in Devlin's life right now, and Devlin's get away from me. But anyway, the very first scene is Devlin hooking up with the hero Micah, and this is a very dark room, and they do have the lights flickered once, so they did see each other's faces. And come to find out, the next morning they see each other in Devlin's office building. He is the CEO of this company. They're in the elevator and they recognize each other. Micah is an intern at this company. He's 24 years old, and Devlin's just oh my god. He works in my building, and gets his secretary, his personal assistant, to find out who this guy is. And he's been at the office, for a couple months now. Everyone loves Micah. They have a lot to say about him. Devlin does the CEO thing, goes in his emails, and notices that the person that Micah is working under is passing off a lot of extra work for him to do that's not in the description of the job description for his internship, but he's handling it like a pro. And so he's just really fascinated with Micah. He calls him up to his office and they immediately, the sexual tension between these two is so on point. And like, Devlin's so awkward. He's so awkward. And Micah had recently come out to his parents. And so he's not really been in a relationship. He knew that he was gay for a long time. And he struggled with reconciling his sexuality and telling his parents basically disowned him because he dated this girl all throughout high school and she expected a ring and he's just like, I can't live like this. I can't live this lie. And so he's openly out. I mean, he's not screaming it from the rooftops, but he's not hiding it. But Devlin, he always has a woman on his arm. He sleeps with women. He's bisexual and, but he's extremely attracted to Micah and he knows that this is like completely wrong, but Micah is so into it. And so they do start a secret relationship. Now, I will say trigger warning because there is an assault scene that happens to one of the heroes in this book. And when I tell you, like, I want to cry thinking about it. Oh my God, am I going to cry? No. Oh my God. I really did cry during this book. It was so heartbreaking and but it's also one of the few scenes where we do see like or the few books where we do see a man being assaulted by a woman, and it is jarring and it could happen to anybody can be assaulted, no matter if you're like this big 6'4" dude, hunking dude. That doesn't mean a thing whenever a predator is determined to assault somebody. And I was just like, oh, and the way that we deal with it after, it's just, I love this book. 5 stars, 5 emotional stars. And then I had my Beauty and the Beast reading vlog that I did. So I'll briefly go over, even though I have a vlog, I'll link that down below if you're interested in listening to my thoughts, my in-depth thoughts about each of these books. So first I listened to A Beast of Beauty by Chandra Han. I think that's how you say her name. I gave this book 3 stars. It was a fantasy romance that didn't really work for me just because I felt like the chemistry between the hero and the heroine, Rosalie and Xander, they were married in the very first scene of this book, and he's never seen her face because she was veiled whenever they got married, and he's convinced that if he looks upon her face, like his father has told him, that she will enchant him because she's the daughter of Lady Evil, that has it out for all of the 7 rulers of this country, whatever. So he immediately hates Rosalie, doesn't want anything to do with her. The only way that she can have a semblance of a normal life is to pretend to be a servant, and she has her little lady's maid in on it. They kind of switch clothes and they meet like that, where Xander meets her, thinks that she's a serving girl, Rose, and they kind of have a romance, but it's always tainted with the fact that Rosalie resents him for flirting with somebody whenever he's married. And also he had a previous love interest before he married her. And it was just like very convoluted plot. There's like a beast in the forest killing people. She's having weird dreams. There's a random like gnome, not a gnome, that just kind of appears and it's just like, okay, we have a weird gnome that likes to suck the blood off of people's fingers. I don't know. It didn't do much for me. I thought it was wrapped up too quickly in the end, and I thought that the confessions of love kind of came out of nowhere because they spent the majority of the book like hating each other. Then I read To Beguile a Beast, which was my favorite book of the Beauty and the Beast reading vlog. I love Elizabeth Hoyt, and Beauty and the Beast tropes, I will never get tired of them, no matter if what are you doing? No matter if I read a bunch of them that don't work for me, it's still the trope itself is one of the ones that I'm always constantly looking for retellings and new takes on it, and Elizabeth Hoyt just delivered on everything. We have a scarred hero. He has a burned face. He's missing an eye. He was basically a prisoner of war in America, and he got tortured. And he's living all by his lonesome in his Scottish castle, and it's very like derelict. He's let it just slide and everything is just falling apart. And our heroine, Helen, she is the mistress of this duke, this very powerful duke in London. And she's realized that she doesn't want to live like this anymore. She's been his mistress for, you know, more than a decade. And she wants a better life for her and her children. So she decides to escape him. And one of her friends, who we meet in the previous book in To Seduce a Sinner, suggests, if you don't mind doing like housework, you can pretend to be a housekeeper and you can go to Scotland. I know a guy who needs one. So I love how Melisande like sets them up basically. And I just loved their relationship. I love the chemistry between the hero and the children and Helen as well. Just the whole dynamic, it worked for me. I loved it. 5 stars. Then I read Briarly by Aster Glen Gray, and this was an Beauty and the Beast retelling. I loved it. It's set in the 1940s. One of the heroes is a pastor and the other one is the Beast. Where are you going? He's like so hyper today. So one of our heroes is a pastor, parson, and I don't know the difference between, like, I don't know how parson ranks in England. I believe they're in England. I digress. And our other hero, the beastly hero, is actually like a dragon, kind of like a dragon man. And their relationship is so freaking cute because the parson, it like goes the way that normal Beauty and the Beast fairy tales go, where he happens upon the house, he eats a meal before he leaves, he takes a rose to give to his daughter, Rose, and then the dragon's like, hey, you stole from me, bring me your daughter. And this time he's like, no, I'm not bringing you my daughter. But he stays there because he's kind of intrigued about this curse. I love how the parson suggests that maybe it's not romantic love that the dragon needs to feel to break the curse, but other types of love. And so he suggests a puppy, and he goes and gets a puppy and he brings it to the dragon. I love how the dragon slowly just kind of melts, and he's such a grumpy hero, but like the parson will not let his grumpiness push him away. And then eventually it comes out that the parson is bisexual, and he figures out that the dragon, the reason why he's never found anybody to love is because he's been trying to force himself to love women, and he's actually attracted to men. And it was just like such a cute slow burn, like no steam. There's really no like steaminess about this, but it was such a cute love story. I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars because I wish that there was a little bit of a sexy scene in there, but without, it doesn't matter. It was still amazing. It was beautiful. Then I read a mafia retelling of Beauty and the Beast called Beauty and the Beast. Guys, I did not enjoy this book at all. It was poorly written. It just was. The story wasn't well crafted. The setup in the beginning, I thought it was going to be such an interesting take on Beauty and the Beast. The way that the heroine kind of hoard herself out to be able to have money to pay for her father's cancer treatment. And our hero basically rescues her from this situation by offering her a similar deal, but with him. And he is the head of the mafia group, whatever they are. It was just, my biggest problem was that they spend no time together, and once they confess their feelings to each other, I was like, again, it came out of nowhere. You don't spend time with each other. Even the sex scenes were very lackluster. I didn't care for the majority of this book. I didn't care for. It was just weird. It was such a weird reading experience, so I didn't like that. 2.5 stars. Oh, I reread Untouchable. I'm not going to rehash this again. Very dark romance. Not a lot of people like it, but I do, so I felt like rereading it. 5 stars still for me. I reread A Hunger Like No Other for our March Patreon exclusive. I enjoyed talking about Immortals After Dark series, especially with Nicola, who's one of our patrons, who initially turned me on to the series. She was like, I really want you to read it. And I've heard about Immortals After Dark for years and years and years. It was an intimidating series to start because there's so many books in it, and she finally convinced me last year to start it. So when our poll for pick a vampire, paranormal, or romance, or urban fantasy, or whatever came up, we had 2 Immortals After Dark books up in the poll, A Hunger Like No Other and Dark Needs at Night's Edge, I believe. The one with the ghosts, Conrad and Noemi, I love that one. I kind of wish that one won because I wanted Juliet to read a ghost romance because she doesn't like them, and I was like, but you might like this one because this is one of my favorites. But anyway, we reread A Hunger Like No Other. I still like this book like a lot. I would give it 4 stars upon reread, but I will say that Lachlan and Emma are my least favorite like-hey couple of the, like, you know, the werewolf clan. Least favorite, like I don't want to give it 4 stars, 4.5 stars. I still did enjoy it. Lachlan's kind of a douchebag in the beginning, but Emma is, I love her character. She's a really great character. I love her kind of like identity crisis because she's half vampire, half Valkyrie, and the Valkyries don't like any other supernatural beings besides other Valkyries. They hate vampires, and it's just, it was a great story of kind of self-discovery on Emma's part. So I did enjoy the reread, and I do plan on jumping back into the series so that I can finish it all out. I have them on audiobook. I will be listening to them sometime soon, probably sometime in April. Then I squeezed in a few more. I read a lot of books this week. This isn't even including April 1st through the 3rd, which is part of the same week. But anyway, then I read To Be Alone With You by Jodie Slaughter. This is the first Jodie Slaughter book that I've ever read. I'd seen her name around, and when this book popped up, the book cover sold it for me. I love it. But anyway, so that's why I picked up this Jodie Slaughter. Finally, I know that a lot of people were reading like the Hitman romance by Jodie Slaughter, but I had no idea that this book was like a quarantine romance. So it's told during the times of COVID. Like it starts off right before lockdown. And I've read a couple of them like that, more like kind of smutty novellas. But this one was definitely more realistic. The only problem I had with it is that, so the heroine, Naomi, she's 10 years younger than Ira. And Ira was kind of like her mother's protege. Her mother's an artist, and Ira is an artist as well. And when he first was around Naomi, she was 21 years old and he was 31. And she, in the beginning of the novel, she's like, yeah, I confessed to him when I was 21 that I was in love with him. And so we never really see her fall in love with Ira because she's always been in love with Ira. And so I don't know, the romantic aspect of it just it wasn't there for me. Like I didn't believe that these characters were truly in love with each other. Lust, yes, but I don't know. I just wasn't feeling the love between them. And Naomi was always just so awkward, just kind of like, oh, that one time that I said I loved you, and like, I know you don't feel the same way. And she kept bringing it up, and it made me feel a little bit awkward. I'm just like, I don't know. I would have preferred Naomi to have a little bit more confidence. It's been 10 years. And it didn't really work for me, so 3 stars. Then I've been trying to listen to the audiobook for Crave. This book is a 600-page book. And I got up to about 50%. So I read 300 pages of this book, which is a whole entire regular size book. I didn't include it in like my March reads because I DNF'd this book, but technically I read a whole ass book. I just DNF'd it because I got so sick of the heroine just not asking questions. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Crave is a YA romance. It's basically like Twilight 2.0. Tori recently read it, and this is why I picked it up, because I was like, yeah, I want to read a Twilight 2.0. I do. I enjoyed Twilight. I don't dislike it. I like it for exactly what it was. I love Midnight Sun. And anyway, so I decided to read Crave. And it plays out a lot like Twilight. Twilight is mentioned in this book, actually. The heroine is like gifted Twilight, so they're aware of this book, the existence of this book. And I think that maybe that was one of the things where I'm like, if you've read Twilight and these things are happening around you, I don't know, even if it sounds far-fetched, I'd be like, man, this sounds like a lot like, you know, Bella having supernatural occurrences around her and Edward turned out to be a vampire. Maybe all the people around me, maybe they're supernatural creatures as well. She's just happy with being like, hey, I know something's going on. So like, if you ever feel like telling me what's going on, I'm just here to hear it. But like, she doesn't try to put 2 and 2 together. She's just like, I'm aware something's going on, but I'm fine not asking questions. And I wasn't fine with Grace, the heroine, not asking questions. Grace is recently orphaned. She goes to this boarding school that her uncle is like the headmaster of, whatever, in Alaska. And her cousin, she has a cousin there that kind of takes her under her wing. She sees that there's a lot of like cliques going on, and this bad boy Jackson is part of this clique, the hero, which is our Edward 2.0. At 50%, she's still not figuring out that there's any sort of supernatural creature, even though she's had so many instances where it's just like, this is a weird thing that happened. They keep telling you don't go outside without like all your protective warmth layers, and they go outside in like t-shirt and jeans, and she's just like, I couldn't do it, so I DNF'd it, even though I was like, I felt like maybe the supernatural aspect was going to be stated sometime soon, but I was just done with it. After 300 pages of nothing happening, I was done with it. And then finally, I listened to the audiobook of Game Changer by Rachel Reed. I've heard a lot about the second book in this series, but I've been listening to audiobooks on AnyPlay, which is a new audiobook app. They're still working out some kinks with the app, but for the price that you pay and you get unlimited audiobooks, I'm dealing with any of the little kinks or whatever. So this is the first book in the Game Changers series, and this is, I think all of them might be hockey romances, hockey romances. And one of our heroes, Kip, he is struggling because he graduated in history and he really wants to work like in a museum, that type of like environment, but I mean the jobs aren't like plentiful, and so he's working at the smoothie shop. And so Kip, one day there's this guy that walks in, he's really hot. They kind of have like a flirty moment, and he's very like awkward, and it's very like sweet and cute, this awkwardness. Then his coworker's like, oh my god, do you know who that was? That's Scott. Like, he is one of like the biggest hockey players like ever in the NHL. And Kip's like, oh my god, I can't believe I didn't recognize him. He was like too blinded by this like sparks of chemistry. Well, Scott keeps returning to the smoothie place, and he claims because it's like, you know, they're hockey players are, what's the word? Not ritualistic, but they're superstitious. So they have to do, if something works and the game goes well that night, they have to repeat whatever was working for them. And so he comes into the smoothie shop claiming that the blueberry smoothie that Kip made him, like he needs that to be able to like win his games. So they start up a romance, but Kip is not out. He is not publicly out at all. He actually abstains completely during his hockey season, and then during the summer off months he goes to Europe, and then he hooks up with people there, and he is not ready to be out. And this is the main source of conflict with the book, and like I sympathized on both sides, even though I was frustrated with Scott more. So this relationship happens fast and furious. They fall for each other so fast, and maybe that's one of the aspects that I didn't like about it as well, because I just wish that they actually spent more time together. It was very sexual. This is basically like an erotic romance. There's a lot of sex scenes happening, and I wish that we got to see them hanging out more. I know that it's difficult since Scott wasn't out, but I wish we saw them doing more things together besides just having sex. Like after the first couple scenes, I was like, yeah, this is hot, but like, okay, now I can skip it because that's all they're doing. And eventually Kip gets annoyed with having to sneak in to Scott's apartment and just wait for him to be done with his day so that they can spend time together alone in the apartment. And Kip is a very social person, and he's like not doing things socially anymore. And he's been out for a very long time. So it's like he feels like he's back in the closet. So I sympathize with Kip a lot. And I would never want somebody to be pressured to like come out, and I didn't want Scott to feel pressured, but also I feel like it was unfair for Scott to just expect that. They didn't really talk about like, well, will there ever be a point where you would feel comfortable coming out? They never had that conversation. So I think it was unfair of Scott just being like, but it's going good so far right now, so I don't want to like rock the boat, and I don't want to talk about the future. As long as everyone's happy in this relationship, I just don't want to talk about any of these things. But there comes a point where both of them are getting extremely unhappy, but Scott still won't make a move to have this conversation. And so I like this book. I thought it was sweet. The awkwardness between these two, like they felt like very like, I feel like I'm everywhere talking about this book because I feel like there's a lot that I want to say, but I don't want to like go into too many details. But when they first meet, the awkwardness of the conversation was super cute and endearing. But I feel like every conversation that they do have whenever they're not having sex follows this awkward script. It's like they barely know each other, and it kind of reinforces why I'm like, I wish they would spend more time together not having sex, because none of their conversations feel meaningful. We don't feel like we're getting to know they're getting to know each other. I just feel like their conversations are very stilted in one note, and I wish that there was more to explore. So I'm gonna give this book 4 stars. I did enjoy it though, very sweet. And I'm excited about the second one though, because it's kind of set up at the end who the second one's gonna be about. And I've heard that everyone really loved the second one. So I'm gonna jump into that one sometime soon. All right, that is it for my last weekly wrap up in March. I will be doing my monthly wrap up very soon. We'll talk about my stats and what was my favorite books and what was my least favorite books. And yeah, can't believe we're already in April. It's crazy. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified of any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys.